move on. Yeah, let's go ahead and do the Upland Game Bird stamp request. Elmer, you're on again. Commission will review and be asked to approve 15 projects submitted for funding from Upland Game stamp funds. Total cost of the project $406,383.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Elmer, Division Chief, Habitat Division Chief for NDOW. As you mentioned, we have a large list of projects that our field staff has submitted for funding from the Upland Bird Stamp Fund. Again, to give a little background on the Upland Bird Stamp, any hunter who's interested in pursuing upland game species in Nevada, if they're 12 years of age or older, are required to buy an Upland Bird Stamp. The funds generated from the sale of those stamps go into a designated fund and are available for projects that are approved by the Commission for the protection and propagation of upland game birds and for the acquisition, development, and preservation of the habitats of upland game birds in this state. We have, as you mentioned, 15 projects. Total of $406,383. To go through a brief budget accounting of the Upland Bird Stamp Fund. We are starting fiscal year 12 with a balance of about $614,151. We anticipate revenue from Upland Bird Stamp sales to be approximately $268,000. The projects that we've lined out would cost $406,383. which would give us a balance at the end of fiscal 12 of $475,768. One thing that I would like to note, and this was an error on my part, but the table on page 7 is actually the one that's the most recent and the most accurate. When I was putting this booklet together, or when our staff was putting it together, I mistakenly inserted page 9. And it's a very similar table, but it did not take into account a donation of $36,000 that came to us from the Carson Valley Chucker Club. And so the table on page 7 is the one that is applicable to what we're doing here today. So again, whatever your pleasure is, I would, we can present, talk about these, or answer questions, or whatever.
Okay, any commissioners have any questions with regard to the Upland Game Bird projects? Commissioner McBinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me, sorry everybody. You know, considering the conversation that we had earlier, I think this is a good time to point out that a lot of these projects are really aimed at implementing local conservation plans for sage grouse. And you know, having been here and seen the start of that whole process and being a part of it, not quite as long as some of these other folks have, but having a little gap and then coming back, I can tell you that the difference in the movement towards actually doing something and implementing those plans is noticeable. And I'm not sure you guys realize that necessarily because you haven't had a chance to just sit back and look, but it's different, and I can see it. You know, originally reading these, I was a little concerned with some of the timing. There's a lot of moving parts here. A lot of these projects rely on money from other sources. It's pretty evident that you're leveraging federal dollars with the money that's being asked for here today, which goes a long ways towards getting these projects done. So I just wanted you guys to know that you can see the effort, and it's appreciated. And I'm sure those local planning groups for those sage grouse in particular, you know, it's nice that they see something actually headed their way and it's maybe some success. We'll keep our fingers crossed. So appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Certainly the situation with sage grouse is not something that we're going to be able to effectively address all by ourselves. So the formation and development and nurturing of good partnerships is critical for that. Thank you.
Commissioner Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Elmer, again, to you and your staff, and I think it's evident by 10 cabs supporting this proposal and none opposed. But Again, great job putting this together. I also was really excited to see a lot of sage grouse emphasis in this. But in addition to that, the partnerships and the collaboration that was going on with those projects. And I guess my only recommendation and maybe suggestion going forward, again, we've got a big reserve in this account. We've got a big problem with sage grouse, so the more projects we can start making hit the ground, the more support you'll get from at least this commissioner.
One other thing that I would mention is that because these are non-federal dollars, we in many cases can use these funds to match the federal grants that we have, thereby lessening the pressure on the licensed dollars. We don't have to necessarily come up with licensed dollars to help match these grants. So these kinds of funds are incredibly valuable for us.
Okay, very good. Why don't we go ahead and let this out to the public and the cabs for comment. Anybody have any comment on the Upland game bird stamp projects?
Walt Mandeville, Lyon County Board. We discussed these projects, and I was pretty thrilled to see a number of projects that were ideas and things that I was involved in when I worked for the department, especially in the Lyon County area with the China Camp project and the ones in the Pine Nuts, all related to sage grouse, and those are some great projects. We did find one issue that bothered us, and that was the surrogator for perch, the effort to raise quail and pheasants. And there's the past experience shows that that's an expensive and not a very good way to produce upland game. You have to have the habitat has to be right. And generally speaking, Nevada does not have very good pheasant habitat, pure and simple. We don't grow enough corn or grain and all those things that go with it. The department years ago used to put pheasants out before the gun, thousands of them, and they did some studies that showed that the released pheasants, I think it was like, I don't know, 5% or 3% survival at the end of 1 year. They don't survive very well, especially artificially brooded animals. And I dealt with Himalayan snowcocks and a lot of those issues. And so we are against the expenditure for the surrogators. The rest of the projects, we're way behind. We're good. Thanks.
Elmer.
If I could just respond to Walt's comments there, we fully understand that releasing adult hen-raised pheasants has proven fruitless many times over. Literature is filled with that. The surrogator program is another twist on this process. And the way this works for those that maybe weren't on the board when we started using surrogators at Mason Valley, the surrogator is simply a box. I can't remember how big. It's about 6 foot square and maybe 2 feet high. And the theory behind the use of the surrogators is to minimize the exposure of the birds to humans. And the way it works is that we put these boxes out in the habitat where we intend for those birds to be released. We buy day-old pheasants, or we can buy quail. The surrogators will accommodate both of those. The birds are raised in those surrogator boxes. There's a large feed supply there, so we don't have to go in and be feeding them constantly. There's a water supply in there. There's even a heater, because sometimes when we get these small birds, it's still a little bit chilly, so there is an opportunity to put heat into this box. And the birds are raised for 5 or 6 weeks in that box, very little exposure to human beings. And then the doors of the surrogator are open and the birds are released out into that habitat. The literature, before we ever entered into this program at Mason Valley, our guys did a pretty extensive amount of research, and the surrogators have proven fairly effective in other areas. And even though it's a little bit early to try to interpret data from the Mason Valley area, we are seeing increased crow counts in Mason Valley, and it's looking like maybe things are turning a good direction for us from this program. So the decision was made to try this program at Kirch. And expense-wise, yeah, the initial purchase of the surrogators is a little bit expensive, and but once we have the surrogators, they're very durable. They last for years and years. The ones at Mason Valley are still in great condition. The pheasants that we buy are really pretty cheap. We're going to pay about $750 for day-old pheasants to be put in at Mason Valley this year. So you know, the total cost is not real high. I guess the jury's still out as to whether this is a real effective means to augment or establish a population of these upland birds. But the feeling at the time was, you know, we're not looking at huge amounts of money. If it worked, great. So that's why we're continuing to push this thing out a little bit.
Dr. Dixon.
I'll just state for the record that once again you did an outstanding job on your booklet, and we supported all the projects here, but I would like to say that Clark County was very pleased with the fact that we've done the surveys in southern Nevada of the guzzlers and the things that we have to do, and we're glad to see that process had started about 2.5 years ago of developing what we needed to do, getting the surveys, has come to full circle to fruition to getting funding to doing that work scope in this duck stamp request. And I want to let people know that in general, when you want to do something, there's a hysteresis or life cycle that has to go through to get to where you are today. And I use this as one of the examples with people up in the Overton area, that if we start this process that I want to start for new projects, we're looking at 18 months to 2 years down the road before things change. But I wanted to let people know that this is a case where we identified an issue, we went out and collected all the data through aerial surveys and other things, and various organizations from NBU and others, and Desert Bighorn, and use that with hunters to basically come back to you with a proposal that you guys are indicating you would like to fund this year, and I appreciate that support. Thank you.
Okay. Looks like no more public comment. Bring it back to the board. Commissioners, have any comments, questions? Commissioner Howell.
Elmer, there's no pheasants over there now. I mean, I haven't seen any pheasants since Millie moved to Ely when she closed the store. There's just no, when she was there, she was feeding pheasants every day. But there's no pheasants around there anymore. We have quail, but only in the 40 acres, the private 40 acres. But when you get outside of there, I don't see no quail. You know, and of course, nobody wants to shoot them in the 40 acres. But the quail, I can see maybe trying to augment that, but the pheasants, that'd be a tough road to hoe, I think.
I understand what you're saying for sure, and I think trying to enhance pheasant populations anywhere in the state seems to be a heck of a challenge for us. But one thing that we have done at Kirch is the establishment of what's called a dove field. That started with Dana Johnson a number of years ago. We're expanding that to the degree that we can. One of the challenges in establishing quality upland bird habitat there is that it has irrigation requirements, so we've got to kind of balance the act out between upland bird habitat and waterfowl habitat. But we do feel that we've got some pretty good habitat. I was out there about 6 months ago, and the fields are looking pretty good. There's still other habitats on the property that we feel could support pheasants. We're never going to look like South Dakota out there, but we feel this is worth an effort, and the expenditure is not tremendous, so that's why we're recommending this.
Okay. Seeing no further commission comment. I guess we'll go ahead and entertain a motion on the Commissioner Walls.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to approve the 15 projects under the Upland Game stamp request for a total cost of $406,383.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All the commissioners understand the motion. Any further comment? Being none, we'll go ahead and take the vote. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand and indicate aye. Aye. All opposed? None? Okay, motion passes. At the break, there was a question whether we should break for lunch. And so we are right now at the Falconry regulation update. Then we're going to have, I guess, item 12, we're going to have a report on the predation management plan. 14 is gone. Then we have the informational report. So anybody have any idea what you want to do for lunch? Do you want to break for lunch, or you want to keep plowing away? What do you want to do?
Keep going.
Oh,
Keep going.
Okay.
it's public.
Okay, keep going. Okay, let's keep moving. Next agenda item, federal state falconry regulation update. Chief of Wildlife Diversity, Laura Richards, and Corey Dalton, Nevada Falconers, informational item. And this is on a report will be provided by Corey Dalton on behalf of the Falconers in Nevada concerning falconry regulations, outlining suggestions for the Falconers on state compliance with federal regulations. Is it two separate items? Okay. Okay, so Laura first. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, I'm Laura Richards, the Chief of the Wildlife Diversity Division. I'm here to present an informational update on the process and timeline to align the state falconry regulations with federal falconry regulations. As many of you are aware, the Fish and Wildlife Service revised the federal regulations regarding falconry. And NDOW is currently drafting amended language to NAC governing the practice of falconry in Nevada. This effort is required to align the state regulations with the revised federal regulations completed in 2008. The states have until 2014 to have their regulations approved by the Fish and Wildlife Service for continuing licensing in falconry in Nevada. In Nevada, we have been forming a set of draft state regulations incorporating the federal text. We've conducted our first round of falconer scoping meetings. We had one on May 18th in Reno, and also one in Las Vegas on May 19th. We sent letters to all the licensed falconers inviting them to the meetings. At the Reno meeting, we had about 18 attendees, and in the Las Vegas meeting, we had about 17 attendees. A copy of the draft regulations were posted on our website, and we accepted written comments from most people that could not attend those meetings. Following those May scoping meetings, our team from NDOW, of the license office staff, law enforcement division staff, and wildlife diversity division staff began revising the draft regulations based on the feedback that we got at those public scoping meetings. Some of the major changes we've agreed to based on the falconers' input include moving the minimum apprentice falconer age back to 12 from 14. Right now it's 14, and that was at the falconer's request. Moving the minimum age for the general falconer from 18 to 16, currently it's 18. We are incorporating the CFR Code of Federal Regulation banning requirements and dropping the state requirements for all species to be banded, so it's more liberal. We have also incorporated CFR language on the species that may be possessed by an apprentice falconer, so it's more liberal. And there's a number of other housekeeping type changes that we've made, including making the number of days for reporting standard across all the regulations. These revised regulations will be sent to LCB for review in the near future. Once the regulation is approved by LCB, we will submit the regulation for an agenda item at a coming commission meeting, probably sometime this winter. LCB has said that it's going to take them a while to go through the regulation. This will allow for another round of public input And then following commission approval, the regulation will be sent to the Legislative Regulations Committee for approval. Our hope is to have the final approved regulations submitted to the Fish and Wildlife Service in early 2012. We remain on track to have the state falconer regulations aligned to the new federal regulations well before the 2014 deadline. We also have to submit and update our falconry database, and also the exam for falconers has to be updated by federal regulation. And we certainly will work with the falconry community to get that exam completed. The national president, Mary Dickerson, has a list of 150 questions that the Fish and Wildlife Service has approved for use on an exam, and so we'd like to work with Corey on coming up with the best list of questions for that exam. We really appreciate the input we've received today in Mr. Dalton's leadership role on behalf of the falconry community. We're going to continue to revise the regulations. We just must ensure that the revised regulations are both in keeping with the needs of Nevada falconers and responsible conservation of the falconry resource.
You want to give both presentations and then have comment? Okay, go ahead, Corey.
For the record, Corey Dalton, I represent a large percentage of the falconers in the state of Nevada. To this date, the falconers provided a whole lot of input that the Department of Wildlife took into consideration for some of the regulatory acts that they're going to bring back forward. We were asked to come back here around the August-September timeframe to provide the commission with an update. The issue with the September meeting is, well, it was originally where maybe the change was going to go to Vegas, and since it was myself as pretty much the front runner for all this, it's kind of a lot of work for me to go all the way to Vegas and all that. So we came back here to have it at the August meeting. It appears that the department is really becoming more receptive to the input that we gave them, and we just we're really working together to try and resolve any of our issues. And I think we're actually moving in a pretty progressive direction, and there's a few things that we may still have to talk back and forth about. The department had some concerns with regard to law enforcement and accountability for trapping and so forth. And I need to basically say that they've done a pretty good job. They're working really hard, and the falconers just we had a little concern that maybe our issue was going to kind of fade away just a little bit with some changes in administration and the commission, and a lot of the uproar of the black bear and whatnot took a lot of the front end. And we're such a small group that we really appreciate all of the assistance we're getting from the department and from the chairman. And you guys are, it's great that you listen to us, because there is so few of us that do this sport. And we just really are hoping that the sport will be done with the federal regulations in compliance to where both sides, are agreeable with the end result. And it's like I was telling Laura and Rob back there, is that we just don't want you to think that it's, once you decide this is done. There's contingencies in the federal regs. If your state comes to an issue that isn't working, that you do have the full freedom to address it for your state and keep things going in a positive direction for the sport. And we just really are basically here to state that we're still willing to work with everybody and continue forward with what we're working on. So
I got two questions for you then, Corey. First of all, is the early 2012 timeline a good timeline? It seems like given that we have September meeting, December meeting, then the next meeting is going to be early, in 2012, February 3rd, 4th. Is that time frame? Does that look like it's working all right for the Falconers?
Yeah, the cutoff for the 2012 year is in 3 weeks on September 1st, and we knew ahead of time that we weren't going to make that cutoff to be in the new Federal Register as a state that is adopted. So if we get it in and completed December, January, it won't matter, because the feds will sit on it until September 1st, and then they submit every state for that year all at once. But this September 1st is the last cutoff, because that means you'll be adopted in 2013, and when you come around to the 2013 year, you better have, that's it, because they stop accepting on September 1st. But we're pretty confident. I mean, we're down to, I think, just a couple little things that the Falconers would really like to know, some explanation on why something would be more restrictive than the federal requirement, and what would make, you know, Nevada different than, you know, another state that had changed the way that they are going to do that same function. And the main goal of our group is to reduce the complexity to somebody new to the sport that's trying to figure out the regs, and to keep the amount of regulation that the state has to track and maintain and so forth, you know, down to a minimum, to reduce the cost to the state, because it's inconsequential, or the dollar amounts that we contribute to the state with our license, but we do contribute, and we just want to make sure that the funds are used in a meaningful way versus trying to progress through a whole lot of regulations that can be expensive over time to constantly have to keep updated or whatnot. But we think we're moving in a pretty positive direction now. So
second comment is that I assume that our regulatory process and the ability for you to be able to file a petition to amend regulations is the same process for all regulations, and so this isn't a static thing. This is something that obviously, if something else comes down the road, and if there are changes or other states are doing something and you need something, I don't see any reason why you can't bring forth a petition to amend those regulations.
Yeah, it's a standard NAC and NRS.
And being a sportsman's rep, one thing I've had to get used to is that my background is big game hunting, and I have done waterfowl hunting, I've done upland game bird hunting, and I've done all those things. But my principle is big game hunting. But what I've learned is I represent all of you, and so I take very seriously the obligation to represent all the sportsman groups. And so I hope that you'll see that I will follow Chairman Rain's lead on getting you through this early process. I commit myself to make sure that you guys get taken care of.
Yeah, we thank you for that very much, because we try and follow everything we're supposed to, but when you don't have a big voice, it's kind of hard to be heard. But we're glad that you guys entertain our meetings and let us speak our minds on things that are coming up. So I'd like to commend Scott has done a tremendous job at keeping us on target and keeping the department and our group working together. He's done a phenomenal job. I wanted to thank him for all the support he's given our group. It's been unbelievable, the amount of support we've gotten. And I think all the commission is just, like I said, I just am really appreciative that you guys will sit here and listen to our group. We, kind of bark a little loud sometimes, but we kind of have to, so.
That's all right. Okay, any other commissioners with comments, or go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, just kind of a couple questions here. One of which is, Corey, if you give us a little bit of background on the support material, because this support material that we got was developed, well, Corey can tell us how it was developed, and then I'd also like to then hear from NDOT, if you could give us, is there any problem with this as it's written? And if there's any issues, where are they? And then I'll just have a little comment on what the commission decided before for you guys.
You want to go ahead?
Okay, sure. Just as a way of some background, I would say 5 or 6 months ago, the NDOW team got together, law enforcement, license office, wildlife diversity staff, and started investigating how we were going to revise these regulations. And at the time, by that group, it was decided for ease for the public and for our law enforcement folks to pull the federal regulations, the language into the NAC. So we spent a great deal of time and effort, and Maureen Hollander spent a lot of hours going through the NAC and making sure that where the federal language was pulled in was in the correct place. And so we had, I think, a very thorough draft set of regulations, and that's what we sent out for the public meetings for review in May. And people commented on those draft regulations at those public meetings and had a lot of great input. And so at this point, we've revised those regulations that we came up with the federal regulations, pulled it in. And at this point, we'd like to go forward with the way that we have set up that framework.
And the document that was sent forth by our group was simply a secondary option for the commission to, decide if they wanted to go in that direction. What it is it's an exception document along the lines of if certain federal regulations were going to be adopted by the state, that the premise that people were considering was to leave it as a federal regulation and to reduce some of the complexity of the document itself and some of the management of the number of NACs that could come about, was to just write an exception document of things pertinent to Nevada, where Nevada chose to be more restrictive on something versus less restrictive. And the group still really, on a complexity level, feels that an exception document versus the entire document would be easier. Like I said, I'm just kind of a voice here. So, but they were all the impression that maybe be easier for the wildlife department to maintain it and to send it to LCB as a smaller exception document versus a larger one. So we just were presenting our document as a secondary option to go to LCB, since you can pretty much only send one and work with one. They wanted to throw that and let the commission maybe decide if that was a direction they wanted to go. And I don't know what direction that the commission would like to move with that, but they just seem to think that less would be easier to understand and get through and keep the process moving than pulling everything in word for word was where they were coming from with those documents. And of they're also pointing out that the majority of the states have chose to go in that direction with writing an exception document where they just reference the federal regulations each time.
Commissioner McNinch.
Mr. Chairman, so what we've got, Corey, is the Falconers version. We don't have the state's version at this point in time. Is that what the proposal that was put together, is that?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, our draft regulations prior to the scoping meetings were posted on our website. We have not revised them and posted them. They're just about ready to be posted again based on the public comments that we got. And so we'll post those on our website as well. And we've talked to Randy Stevens from LCB. I told him that this was coming because it is a big effort. And I think our preference is to go ahead and submit this document that we worked very, very, hard on the last few months. And they might make a suggestion on a change in framework. We don't know, but I think we're ready to go ahead and submit it to them.
So right now we don't have. So we've kind of got two ways of handling this floating around out there, which is it's boiling down to what's going to be the best way. But most of the content in what's proposed to us, Corey, here is largely represented in the state's, the department's document that we don't have a copy of at this point in time.
Yes, it's basically a framework issue on how to go forward. All the information would be either in one document or a reference document, depending on what LCB comes up with.
Just one question. So your exception document is basically to incorporate the federal regulations by reference. Is that that's basically what's happening?
Yeah, that was kind of a decision that a lot of the guys had realized that they didn't want the regulations for the Nevada to get kind of to be where there's so many to maintain over time, and a lot of them felt that writing an exception document with references to the federal CFR would have been easier to understand from a new person to the sport perspective, and for a long-term management and reduction in cost to the state. Basically, if in the future there's some aspect that doesn't work, you draft an NAC to address that or whatever, versus pulling them all in. But
Okay, well, I see two issues with that. Now, if you basically incorporate something by reference, the problem with federal regulations, just like state regulations, are is they get amended. And so amendments could occur, and so is this exception document going to automatically incorporate any amendments to the federal regulation? There's certain aspects of that could be good, but if the amendments to the federal regulations are something that the department can't go along with or feel uncomfortable about, now we end up having to file a regulation to amend the federal regulations. So I can see that there can be some downsides to both sides. Efficiency on one, but basically make it more cumbersome, in other areas. And so, I guess we can talk about that some more. But ultimately, a lot of times when we get into these kind of regulations, I tend to feel that the administrator, the department is really got to be responsible over this. They are ultimately responsible over this resource and this, these regulations, make sure they get implemented. And so,
that's exactly what the feds have decided as well. And so fundamentally, they're done. They wrote a base level of what they want every state to follow. And so it's not going to change on a federal level anymore. That's why they said this is the bare minimum, and that's why so many states have gone to the process of creating an exception document versus writing them all in as state regulations, because there's going to be no more changes on the federal level. They're done with it. In 2014, they're completely out of regulating falconry altogether. But they had to establish a base level nationwide, which is what they did. And it just basically the group wanted to make sure that the commission had quite possibly two options versus one. That was really what they were pushing for. I mean, it wouldn't hurt if the entire federal regs were pulled into the state. They were just trying to keep it a little simpler and not have duplicate regulations, basically. But it's just two options for the commission to make a decision on it to look at. And if the commission wants, I have a copy of the current state, or the current federal for every one of you, if you ever care to look through it and see if it would make sense or not. It's the new federal regs are about 22 pages long.
I guess my only comment back to that is that when I see the federal government not amending regulations, I'll believe it when I see it.
I would too. But they wanted the option out there, so I'm just always
any other commissioners with comment? Commissioner Ray?
Thank you. It's kind of follow where we're at before is, one is we're forced to follow federal regulation. Regardless if it changes 50 times, we've got to follow it regardless. We might as well just reference it. That's the one argument that's come out. Because if we don't reference it, then it'll change, then we'll have to change all of our stuff. If we just reference it, we don't have a choice. We got to follow their rules. That's my understanding. And so it would make it much less burdensome in the future if the feds do. They claim they're not, but if they do change it, okay. It's our new rules. We got to suck it up anyway, but we don't have to go ahead back and change NAC. We don't have to change CG. We don't have to change anything. We're just reference it, and if we have to, re-reference or something, that's fine. We're talking 5 pages versus 20-something pages, to deal with at LCB. Because understanding is this, what's here is actually, it would be condensed into 5 pages because a lot of it is, when we present it, is what will be stricken out. And it's about 5, is that?
Yeah, roughly, yeah.
Give or take, depending on your pagination and stuff. But you talked about a 5-page rough document, it references the feds, they don't get a choice. And no matter, and it was when you were there, the commission basically voted for, hey, we should follow the federal regulation, we should create a document to follow the federal regulation and not more restrictive than the federal regulation, unless it's something that they can work, that the two groups can work out, department and the Falconers. And the department, if the new guys or old guys, if not new guys, whatever, we've had some expressions from the department that the Falconers, basically no matter what we do, they have no impact to the game population because they're such a small group and their take is insignificant. So that argument is basically moot. If we get into it, we're worried about sage grouse or cottontail or whatever. There's such a small impact that if they tripled, they would still be insignificant compared to any other regular hunting. And so it's something we got to do. We got to do it quick because it's not 14, it's really 13, which really means we got to do it like next year. It's the way it works. And why not make it simple? Make it simple on us, simple on LCB. Let's just, that's what I've seen, and hopefully that's where we're going. Simple's good to me. Thanks.
Commissioner Drew?
I agree with Scott that simple is always better, but at the same time, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert or an attorney at writing and drafting regulations and laws. So I guess my first recommendation might be see if you can work out a framework that works for both parties, And if not, maybe have someone at LCB, from LCB the next time we discuss this, to figure out what the pros and cons are from their perspective, because they are the people in the state that are the experts on writing that sort of thing. So that's what I'd like to see, next time we have a chance to talk about it. But I appreciate all your guys' efforts, and I like to see collaboration anytime it's possible. So, good work.
Any other commissioners, any comment? Okay, I guess, we do. Chief, pardon me, Chief.
For the record, Rob Bonamici, Chief Game Warden, if I could just briefly, we're in agreement on a lot of things. Simpler is better. It is simpler for us. It would have been the easy road for us to just adopt the federal regulations. There are issues. We don't, if the feds change the regulation, the state can still be more restrictive. So we don't automatically adopt the federal regulations. We adopt that minimum standard. So that's one point. The other point is that we see in law enforcement all the time, and in dealing with the courts, which I don't anticipate being a big issue with these guys because they're a pretty darn legal bunch. But having the entire regulation a one-stop shop, here it is. I don't have to go and look at the federal regulation. It's all here in state regulation. It's available to us. One spot, easier to understand, rather than, okay, what's the federal, what's the exemption, what's the exception here, and back and forth. It also, for the courts, it makes it easier for district attorneys and judges when everything's in one place. So that's our perspective. Was it more work for us? Yes, absolutely. But we thought it was a better route to go in the long run. Corey is an expert at what he does at Falconry. So he knows the ins and outs. 5 years from now, when we have a new cohort of Falconers come in, there's the apprentice program and all that. These guys, take them under their wings, so to speak. But by the same token, it makes them a lot easier for a new person to just look in one spot to find what they need to know.
Okay. This is a informational item, but I guess at this point, do you, any other comments here? Okay. How about any comments from the public? We have any other Falconers here? I think we do. Any other comments? I guess I don't have to take public comment, but nobody else wants to speak on it then? Okay. Well, this was informational, so and thank you, Corey.